I hear that Switzerland has been able to keep inflation at extremely low levels. Can you explain to me how they do this? Can you go into detail? So, Switzerland is a democracy, um, much like all of Europe or the vast majority of Europe and North America. And they've been able to handle inflationary pressures much better than most other countries. And we're going to have a look at it. I was watching a short video on that the other day. Crucially, okay. Switzerland really is the standout case here. While most of the developed world saw inflation spike to 8 to 10% in 2022-2023, that's end of pandemic era, right? We had the pandemic come in, interest rates drop, inflation spike, and it happened pretty much everywhere in the developed world. Switzerland barely crossed 3% at its worst, and it's since dropped right back down. Consumer prices rose just 0.6% year on year in May 2026, with core inflation around 0.3%, the softest since mid 2021. For context, Swiss inflation was 2.84% in 2022, 2.14% in 2023. So when our numbers were up around 8 or 10%, theirs were 2% isn't a problem. 2.8%, slight problem. You usually target a 2%. Many countries target a 2%. I'd argue that's too high. I think inflation should be lower than that. I like their year on year just 0.6% inflation. That's a nice number. That's a really nice number. And 1.06 in 2024. So, from my understanding, inflation inflation is measured monthly, but they give you the yearly value of inflation, correct? If that percentage of inflation would have continued throughout the entire year. Let me make sure, like, when they give you an 8% inflation a month, that doesn't mean in that month you see an 8% increase in the price of goods, right? That means that if that were to continue throughout an entire year, you would have seen an 8% increase in the price of goods. Okay, not quite. There are two different things here, and the headline number usually isn't the projection you're describing. The most commonly reported inflation figure, the one in news headlines and what Statistic Canada features for CPI, is year over year. It compares this month's price index to the same month a year ago. Okay, so inflation is 3.2%, means prices are actually 3.2% higher than they were 12 months ago. It's a realized change over a full year of data, not an exploration of 1 month. Okay. What you're describing, taking 1 month change and asking what if this continues all year, is a separate legitimate calculation called annualization. Okay. So the number we always see is prices are this much higher than they were a year ago. How does that change how we think about it, or how I think about it? Can you give me the monthly inflation numbers for Canada over the past 8 years and give it to me in a chart? We'll sort of work with that. There's no single trick. It's a stack of mutually reinforcing factors, and the interesting thing is that some of them are deliberate policy while others are structural luck. Let me walk through them roughly in order of importance. The strong franc is the big one. So keeping a strong currency prevents inflation. What's with the two? You're... You put a 1. Oh, you're on Kick. That makes sense. I do that in the beginning of every one because I have this weird program here, and it gathers the chats from Kick, Twitch, and YouTube all onto the screen. So I go 1, 2, 3 on all of them just to make sure they all work. And Kick is usually number 1 because it's actually seen a little bit of growth. So it's the one that's at the top. All right, let's see if it's got my chart for me. Nope. Still figuring it out. So apparently having a strong currency is a hedge against inflation. And so printing money or debt, and doesn't debt weaken your currency? And a weakening currency will then cause more risk of inflation. Okay, this is the mechanism most people underrate. The Swiss franc is a global safe haven currency. Oh, like it's a banking place too, isn't it? When the world gets nervous, money flows into francs. Doesn't the US see that too? When the world gets nervous, money flows into the US dollar. And so it actually strengthens the dollar. Which is why when the world gets nervous, they're able to run bigger deficits. Yes. Okay. And the currency appreciates. How big is Switzerland? Wait, do we have a winner here yet? No. We don't know who we're playing yet. Switzerland population. 9.1 million. So it's a small country. I mean, Canada will play one of these teams. I can't watch it because I'm streaming right now, but I'm keeping tabs on it. It looks like a heck of a game. I mean, look at that. They're 30 minutes into overtime. Does the +1 mean they only get 1 overtime? I might go back and watch this one because we're going to be playing one of these teams. A rising franc makes everything Switzerland imports cheaper in franc terms, since Switzerland is a small, open economy that imports a huge share of its goods. You see, that's a different thing. A strong franc means that because it imports so much, it has more import power. I think they're going to penalties. Ooh, I bet you that's like how long do they play for before they go into penalties? It looks like it's still going on. If it goes into penalties, I might have to watch it. Because Switzerland is importing so much of its it's small population, small economy. You import more, obviously, because everywhere specializes in what they produce. So as you specialize, you have to import more stuff. A strong franc means that the stuff they import is cheaper. As long as you can maintain a good economy in your country, then it's good to have a strong currency. The issue you run into is that if you have a strong currency, your exports are also expensive, and so you gotta. But if your exports are banking, then I don't know. But keeping a strong currency is a good hedge against inflation. That's what we could take away from that. Crucially, the Swiss National Bank wants this and reinforces it. Rather than fighting franc strengthening to help exporters, the usual instinct, the Swiss National Bank has historically tolerated and at times encouraged a strong franc precisely because it keeps prices stable. The Swiss National Bank is one of the few central banks that intervenes massively in foreign exchange markets, buying and selling currencies, building up an enormous balance sheet, partly to manage the franc's level for price stability purposes. Oh, I mean, that just seems like a good idea. Oh, this is different. Did it develop this chart or did it grab this chart from somewhere? What's this? Next time try this in co-work. Okay, well, we're not worrying about that for now. Canadian inflation chart. Well, we got our chart since 2018. So inflation is, you compare this price to the good last year, the same good last year. And so, oh, hit the mic. And so we see a massive increase here. So we have the pandemic. They drop interest rates, making money very, very cheap. In response to the cheap money, goods decrease in value momentarily. Because the inflation rate is, you dropped interest rates, money becomes cheap. They're able to produce more, expand. Honestly, I don't think anything during the pandemic makes sense. You start to see a massive increase in inflation. This is when they start increasing the interest rates to stop this. Because here, the goods are 8.1% more expensive year over year compared to that time last year. And that time last year was actually, okay, that was actually bad too. And then that one was, if anything, low. No, it only drops to negative here. Negative inflation is weird. Goods get cheaper, and it promotes holding money. So you kind of want to avoid that. They say the ideal range is between 1 and 2%. They mark 1 and 3, but I think it's more between 1 and 2. And we went crazy here. And they've brought it down, and now it's starting to tick up again. Like, the war is inflationary. Hopefully we are through that now. I might try and save that copy. I'll do that later. All right. The Swiss National Bank mandates and philosophy differs from peers. The Swiss National Bank defines price stability as inflation below 2%, and it's notably relaxed about it. It doesn't aim for a fixed target value, but it is content to stay within 0 to 2% range. I think that is good. 0 to 2% range. And it deliberately doesn't adjust monetary policy in response to a sudden rise in oil prices. This let the franc do the work approach means the Swiss National Bank reacts less to transitory shocks. Switzerland presuppose flexibility exchange rate geared to internal price stability rather than to stable exchange rates with other countries. In other words, it prioritizes domestic price over trade competitiveness, which is the opposite of many export-led economies. Interesting. So export-led economies like a weaker currency because it allows them to be more competitive on the global market. And Switzerland has essentially done the exact opposite of that. Do I have forces? Let's see if I can find one. Oh. Standard of living map. Let's have a look. How does Switzerland do? Something. No idea where we're looking. Here we go. Standard of living by country. World population review. Okay. 170, 192. US does really well there. 187. Switzerland 210. Whoa. That might be the highest. 215 in an Oman. Oil-rich country. Qatar's probably 188 there, 195. Kind of sad Canada's so low on that one. That's the kind of map you want to be high on. Ooh, Luxembourg is at the top. Nigeria. Really? Nigeria? Is at the bottom? Luxembourg. Where's Luxembourg? It's one of these little ones in here, isn't it? I'm not gonna be able to find it. There, Luxembourg. So Switzerland does really well on standard of living for its citizens. The energy mix shielded Switzerland from the 2022 shocks. A massive chunk of the 2022 global inflation wave came from natural gas and electricity prices after the Russia-Ukraine disruption. Also, COVID response. Switzerland electricity comes overwhelmingly from hydropower and nuclear, not gas-fired plants. Canada has really good good hydropower, nuclear, clean energy as well. So it's not power price. So it's not. So its power prices were far less exposed to the European gas spike. Households and businesses simply didn't feel the same energy cost explosion that hammered Germany, the UK, and others. Administered and smooth prices. Several big components of the Swiss cost of living are regulated or contractually smoothened rather than market volatile. Residential rents, a large CPI weight, are tied to a reference mortgage rate set by the government, so they adjust slowly and in step rather than spiking. Oh, so they have control over their mortgage rates set by the government. So how much a bank can charge on a mortgage is not set by the free market, but set by the government. The issue you have with that, live penalties. They dragged it all the way out to the end. Penalty 2-2. We will know soon who we play. They're really dragging it out. Okay, so reference mortgage rates are set by the government, so they adjust slowly and in step rather than spiking. Healthcare premiums, public services, and certain utilities are similarly administered. This dampens the volatility that shows up sharply in countries with more market-driven rents and services. Okay. The composition of the CPI basket itself, Swiss consumers spend a relatively smaller share of income on the most volatile categories, food and energy, because incomes are very high. When you earn a lot, food and fuel are a smaller factor of your budget. A basket weighted more towards stable services and less towards volatile essentials naturally produces a smoother headline number. Oh, okay. So how they calculate it is naturally smoother because every company is calculating inflation themselves based off a CPI basket of goods and services, and so how they calculate it is different, more weighted towards more stable services and less towards volatile essentials, which is why our chart goes crazy up and down because of how much of it is weighted towards more volatile goods. Okay. Still doesn't change the fact that our spike here was insane, and they did not see it. Structural and institutional discipline. Underneath all this sits a high productivity, high value adding economy. A credible and independent central bank with deep market trust, strong fiscal rules, and a consensus-based wage setting system through social partnership between unions and employers. That last point matters because it reduces the risk of a wage price spiral, the feedback loop where workers demand big raises to keep up with prices and then push prices higher again. Swiss wage bargaining tends to be measured, partly because everyone trusts inflation will stay low, which becomes self-fulfilling. Ooh. So if you can get everyone to trust that inflation will stay low, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people trust the wages will stay low, then they don't demand greater income for their work because they know this work gets me this much stuff. And therefore, if they're not demanding higher wages, the company doesn't raise prices and inflation stays consistent. So the belief of a consistent inflation creates consistent inflation throughout an economy. Low stable inflation expectations are arguably the quietest but most powerful ingredient. When nobody expects high inflation, nobody prices it in. So the honest summary is that it's a combination of one dominant lever, a strong safe haven currency that imports low prices, actively managed by the Swiss National Bank, layered on top of fortunate structure, clean energy, smooth rents, a stable basket, and disciplined institutions, an independent central bank, fiscal rules, and cooperative wage settings. It's worth noting the flip side, since it's not pure magic. The same strong franc that crushes inflation makes Swiss exports and tourism expensive, which is a constant headache for Swiss manufacturers and hotels. The Swiss National Bank spends enormous efforts and balance sheet risks managing that tension. And Switzerland has occasionally flirted with outright deflation, negative inflation, which brings its own problems. The model works beautifully for price stability, but it's not costless and it's not easily transferable. A lot of it depends on the franc's unique safe haven status, which no country can simply decide to acquire. Canada. Oh, it's over, is it? Yeah, okay. Penalties 2-3, so we're gonna play Morocco. Canada needs to hire Messi. Like, I wish, but I think where you're born kind of plays an important role for that. We get to play Morocco, so that'll happen next week. Looks like it was a good game. I might have to go back and watch that one. Switzerland. All right, let's look at their democracy. How did they get here? Can you describe Switzerland's democracy for me? Can you compare it to Canada's democracy? Let's just see what they got. Switzerland's in a unique position. Like, they're not part of the EU, right? EU. European Union countries. Let's see if we can get a map of this. Yeah, like they're very specifically not a part of the EU. Like they're traditionally they've maintained a stance of neutrality. And so they didn't even join the European Union. Which is a large gap in the center of it. Oh, well, it's going to take a second. And so it's kind of a unique country. I also hear it has very good high-speed rail throughout the whole country, despite, you know, being in the mountains. And it's very easy to get around the whole country, even without a vehicle. Let's have a look. Where's their big city? Switzerland. Bern? Zurich. Zurich? Zurich is the one that comes up. We're gonna go have a look at the city. Here's their downtown. Around in here. There's a couple buildings over here. Let's poke our head down here. Everyone's blurred. We're good. Random store on a side street in Switzerland, selling. I don't even know. A chair. shoes. Okay. No, no, no. I'm trying to go. Not that many cars. Yeah, this looks like more like a walkway area. Here's an actual road. Ah, Swiss flag. A little circle. Very interesting. Let's go drop by one of these. I really liked looking at Vienna and their really cool buildings. It looks like Switzerland. I mean, like, let me go this way. That's got its own artistic style. Statues. Love statues. Cities with statues are great. What is that mess? Okay, well that building was exceedingly average. Let's try the other one. That one. No. Oh, I'm honest. Is that church? Is that a church? I love churches. Let me look at this church. We'll go to the front. I want to go that way. Let me go that way. Ooh, okay, okay. We got a nice little river there. Still doesn't compare to the one in Vienna. That church was just glorious. Let's go look at the river. I mean, it's a nice place. I will say, it's a nice looking place. You can probably see the church better from back here. Okay, that's kind of nice. Kind of nice. Where is my Switzerland? We go over to Vienna. Now, where's the big church? I don't remember where the big church was. And it's going to be one of these, right? No, 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 no. Maybe? I remember it being more like more downtown. Is that it? Like, that's the kind of stuff I like. It's not the church I was thinking of, but crazy. I don't know. It's not showing up on the map. I remember it being really easy to find. Ooh. That's a new feature. Do all these get them if I hover? They do. Which proves that none of those are the ones I'm looking for. Not you either. You were definitely up here somewhere. Right. Well, I'm getting off topic. Let's look at the Switzerland's democracy a little bit. I got 500 subs on the line. If you need content for the next 20 minutes, download Mecha. Moving around, painted, full deck green, easy, check it. Okay. Probably not gonna do that. Great topics. The two systems are genuinely illuminating pair, because they're both stable, prosperous federal democracies that arrive at almost opposite institutional designs. Let me describe each on its own terms first, then draw out the contrast. Okay, consensus. Switzerland, consensus and semi-direct democracy. Switzerland's defining feature is that it's a semi-direct democracy. Citizens don't just elect representatives and go home. They don't vote directly on actual policy several times a year. Usually 3 or 4 voting dates with multiple measures bundled into each. Oh, that's interesting. So rather than just electing someone to vote, they get to directly vote. Like referendums, but with weight. Real weight behind them. And consistently. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, music's still working. We're good. Getting your citizens to directly vote on something? What is that called? Semi-direct democracy. Alright, where was I? Usually 3 or 4 voting dates with multiple measures bundled into one. So rather than the elected representatives voting, the people themselves get to vote on policy. Now the downside is obviously people need time and effort to have an opinion about a policy. Like, the whole point of electing someone is that, okay, now you are giving the responsibility to run the country to someone. So now you don't have to do it. It's up to them to make the correct choices to improve our country. And in a semi-direct democracy, you have to directly participate in the electoral process. You don't have to. I assume this is optional. Like, you'd have to have an opinion, so you'd have to like convince other people of your positions on things. That's interesting, because we're kind of doing that in Alberta right now with the referendum, right? Like, I'm going to continue to talk about the referendum questions and what they mean and how I personally will vote on them. And that's just like a built-in feature of Switzerland's democracy rather than a one-time referendum like what we're doing here. I mean, it definitely gives me more to stream about. If you engage people with politics more, there's more political creators. I mean, like that's definitely one outcome. But I kind of like that. Semi-direct democracy. Okay. Spy features. Where was I? The popular initiatives let citizens propose a challenge to the federal constitution. So this is similar to the referendum. If they gather 1,000 signatures within 18 months, it then goes to a national vote. Okay, we have much higher requirements, and I think we have a lower population in Alberta than Switzerland. I don't know what it's like at the federal level, but I think it's Alberta, you needed 300,000 signatures. I think we have roughly half the population of Switzerland, if I'm not wrong. I'm not going to look that up. That's close enough. So higher requirements and less people makes it significantly harder to do. They did lessen it recently, and I like that. Like, For a binding referendum, I think the requirement should be high. For a non-binding referendum, I think the requirement should be significantly lower. And I think a referendum should be done like every year. Right? They do it multiple times a year in Switzerland. Okay, so if they gather 1,000 signatures within 18 months, it then goes to the national vote. The optional referendum lets 50,000 citizens within 100 days force any law already passed by Parliament onto a public ballot, where voters can strike it down. Optional referendum. And the mandatory referendum requires that constitutional amendments and certain major decisions, like joining some international organizations, be put to the people automatically. The result is a political culture where the legislator governs in the shadow of the people's veto. Political draft law knowing voters can overturn them, which pushes everyone towards broad, pre-negotiated compromise. I like that. It's not something you have to engage with, but for those that wish to engage more directly with politics, there is a referendum system that get it looks like you can get optional referendums that are non-binding. I'm guessing this is the binding referendums. Mandatory referendums. Okay. A crucial structural detail. Constitutional change requires a double majority. A majority of the national popular vote and a majority of the 26 Kantons. I'm guessing those are their districts. This gives small, rural, often German-speaking cantons disproportional weight and means densely populated urban areas can't simply impose their will on the country. It's a deliberate break favoring federal consensus over raw majoritarianism. Ugh. Words.
Majoritarianism.
Majoritarianism. The executive is the part that surprises most outsiders. So the executive is Prime Minister, President, the person put forward by the elected body. Switzerland has no Prime Minister and no powerful president. Instead, it has the Federal Council, a 7-member collegial. Why is it whenever I'm learning about democracy stuff, it's these words?
Collegial.
Collegial. What is collegial? To a cooperative, friendly relationship among co-workers, where authority and decision-making are shared equally among peers rather than dictated from the top down. Okay. A 7-member collegial executive elected by the parliament. So rather than putting forward one presidential or prime minister figure, they put forward 7 and they govern collectively. I mean, it does appear to be working for them. The 7 govern as a body, making decisions collectively and defending them collectively. Even when individuals disagree internally, one of them serves as a 1-year term as president of the confederation. But this is primus inter pares, largely ceremonial, mostly about chairing meetings and signing documents, rotating annually. There is no single leader who personifies the government. That is interesting. Those 7 seats are allocated by the famous magic formula, an informal power sharing convention drafted from 1954, recalibrated in 2003 and 2008. So they still change it. That's good. As times change, you do have to update these things. Under which the largest parties each hold a roughly proportional share of council seats. This makes the Swiss government a permanent grand coalition spanning left to right. There's no real government versus opposition the way Westminster systems have it. Our system is Westminster's. There's no real government versus opposition the way Westminster systems have it. Almost every major party is inside the executive. This is the textbook. I mean, if there's 7, you need 1/7 of the votes, and then you're in the executive. So even the minority party or the opposition party is a part of the executive branch. And it works. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind is that would that break down if you have people of differing opinions in there? But they've got it to work. Almost every major party is inside the executive. This is the textbook example of what political scientist Ardent Jalil. Oh, gosh. I don't care about a political scientist.
Arend Leibhardt.
Arden Leibhardt. Called consensus democracy, a system explicitly engineered to manage Switzerland's logistic, German, French, Italian, Romish, religion, and cantonal divisions through power sharing, proportionality, and federalism rather than winner-take-all consensus. They have 4 primary languages in Switzerland. German, French, Italian, Romanish. Whoa, I thought we had a lot here and we only have 2. The Parliament reinforces this. It's bicameral, so they have 2 with 2 co-equal chambers. The National Council, 200 seats elected by proportional representation, apported by population. Okay, and the Council of States, 46. Isn't that the same number as they're like, no, 26 cantons. So 46 seats with 2 per full canton and 1 per half canton. Oh, there's half cantons. Unlike most countries, neither chamber dominates. It's genuinely symmetric bicameral. So no one of the seats has more, no one of the chambers has significantly more power than the other. They're largely equal. And Switzerland runs much of its public life on a militia principle. Members of parliament typically keep their day jobs. The army is a citizen militia, and political service is part-time and decentralized. That is interesting. Members of parliament typically keep their day job, so being a part of the democracy in Switzerland is not a job. The army is a citizen militia, and political service is part-time and decentralized. That is such a different way to run things. Like, this might be the most unique democracy I've come across yet. Like, so many of the ones I looked at are a version of the Westminster style system. And Switzerland just runs it completely differently. We're gonna leave this because they do things so differently, and like, it does a pretty good job. It's going well for them. Now you could say that that's because of like their positioning in which, but like, I don't think they have great natural resources. It's mountainous, not easily to pass over terrain, and they've done a pretty good job at keeping like they're in the top 5. And they come there, like Luxembourg is a weird tax haven. The Netherlands, I don't know why. I mean, they lost at soccer to Morocco. Denmark is, now that's a Westminster style. I remember that one. I think they had proportional representation rather than first past the post. Oman, I think that's just oil rich. Switzerland, Finland is another Westminster style, I believe. Yeah. Okay. Where was I? The Parliament reinforces this. Okay, I just read that. And political service is part-time and decentralized. So I'm going to go through the Canadian stuff fast because I know this one. British system. Canada elects the House of Commons. Yep. Power in Canada famously concentrated, not dispersed, because the Prime Minister commands a disciplined party that controls the Commons. And because party discipline is exceptionally strong by international standards. Yeah. The Prime Minister and the Prime Minister office wield enormous authority. The political scientist, okay. Yep. Canada is a genuine federalization. 10 provinces and 3 territories, with provinces holding strong constitutional jurisdiction over healthcare, education, and natural resources. A fact Albertans feel acutely given resource politics. The division of power comes from the Constitutional Act 1867. Rights are entrenched in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which I have intended to look at and yet not gotten to. Where are you on my list? I know you're here. Right there. We're just down a couple. We'll get there within a couple streams, I think. Through the Charter, Section 33 notwithstanding clause, given legislature controversy power to override certain temporary rights. Okay. Basically, I know everything about the Canada one that they're talking about there. Semi-direct. Representative plus heavy direct democracy. Which is basically the people have a veto over what the government decides. And that's a very interesting concept. And I kind of like that concept. Canada, purely representative. Form of state, a federal republic. And Canada is a federal constitution monarchy. Ceremonial. Executive, 7-member collegial federal council. So I'm assuming that they choose the because you still need a cabinet to run everything, right? So I assume the 7-member collegial federal council chooses them. Dispersed, no single leader. Electoral system, proportional representation. That's the one that I think is important. Now, for Canada, you can bring it in a lot of different ways. Like, you don't have to just completely change the system. There's places like Germany and New Zealand that do a mix system that works very well. But I think the proportional aspect is necessary in a lot of democracies. I think that's the next thing we have to really look at. Government formation, permanent grand coalition, the magic formula. Okay, direct democracy, initiatives and referendums several times a year. In Canada, we have none at the federal level. Alberta has some at the provincial level, but at the federal level, you don't really have them. I think that's an important aspect too. Legislators, systematic bicameral, both chambers elected. Bicameral, unicameral, I don't think it matters as long as they're set up well. Popular vote plus double majority, amended often. Consensus, party discipline weak. That's interesting. Canada, that's probably the biggest difference. In Switzerland, they have weak party discipline, and in Canada, it's exceedingly strong. I mean, as soon as you let the people veto the government, I think you end up with people voting how they feel more than how they should, just to align themselves with the party. The deepest way to understand the gap is to ask what each system is optimized for. Switzerland's design is built to make changes slow, broad, and broadly consented to. Every veto point, the optional referendum, the double majority, the 7-headed executive, the permanent coalition, is there to ensure that no faction, however large, can run roughshod over a minority, whether that minority is linguistic, religious, or cantonal. The cost is glacial decision making. They're doing pretty good for glacial decision making. And chronic difficulty doing anything decisive or fast. Canada's design is the mirror image. It's built to produce clear, accountable, decisive government. A party wins, forms a government, and can actually enact its programs within a single term, and voters know exactly who to blame or reward. The cost is that a party with well under half the vote can wield near total control of the legislative agenda, and large blocks of voters routinely find themselves effectively unrepresented in government. That is the problem right there. Two contrasts are probably the most consequential. The first is the absence of direct democracy in Canada. Swiss citizens are co-legislators in a way Canadians simply are not, and that single difference cascades into everything from political culture to how laws are drafted. The second is the executive, a deliberate leaderless committee versus one of the most powerful prime ministers in the democratic world. If you've been thinking about how electoral and institutional designs shape who actually holds power, Switzerland is the cleanest available example of the consensus model, and Canada is close to a pure case of Westminster majoritarianism dropped into a federation, which is exactly why they make such a useful pair to set against each other. Worth flagging one nuance so the contrast doesn't read as too clean. Canada's federalism, with its genuinely powerful provinces, does temper the majoritarian story considerably. Federal majority government still has to negotiate with premiers over health, education, and resources, something an Albertan feels more sharply than most. So Canada isn't pure majoritarianism the way the United Kingdom is. The federal layer injects a real dose of the same regional bargaining that Switzerland builds in more formally. Okay. So the systems are definitely very different. Um, but the Canadian one also has to contend with the provinces because provinces have quite a bit of power in the federalization. I will say that Switzerland seems to be doing much better than us on the standard of living index. So, what can we learn? I kind of like the average citizen can veto a decision by the government, and that a lot of major reforms are put forward through a referendum system. I personally think that's the best way to keep a country on track, where the average citizenship can voice their opinion on the direction of the country, which is why I'm generally favorable to the referendum happening in Alberta, the leave or stay referendum, even though like I would prefer the status quo, staying in Canada, and I believe most people feel that way. I also think that having the referendum is an important thing, and that we should do more things like that, and that people should be able to give their voice on these topics. And a referendum like that, I like that is not binding now. So the courts, the original idea was a binding referendum, but that got shut down by indigenous tribes and in court battles. So now it's basically a non-binding referendum, which is what I think it should have been. Non-binding referendum, uh, and then if it gets support, you develop it. What would it actually look like? What would the actual costs be? Make that very clear, and then you do an actual referendum. Because that's the trouble I think that the United Kingdom fell into. They basically had a binding referendum where the costs were not clear. People did not understand the full context. It was not fully explained to them, um, the consequences and benefits of being the consequences of leaving, the benefits of being in the EU. It was just a political slop fest, uh, where nobody really knew what would happen if they left. And so I think you don't want to follow that example. That was poorly done, in my opinion. Where was I? Oh, I got to the bottom of this. I like the direct, semi-direct. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna be getting off here. It looks like we are playing Morocco? And yeah, somebody messaged me about it. Canada will play Morocco. Perfect. Actually, I have no. I didn't watch the game, so I have no idea which team is stronger. But I think that'll be a good game. What is this one? Can we open that one in a new tab? 21st. So Canada is 48.1. And so we're kind of middle of the pack in terms of like the European countries. Italy and Spain are actually quite a bit lower, and even Greece. Well, I mean, Greece went through their crisis, right? Um, Surprised Poland's that low. I think Poland's been developing quite quickly. Where's that? Cayman Islands is number 1. Well, tiny little island. 54.6 in the United States. They do good on that front. Japan is 50? Cost of living index. I mean, like, a lot of the low performers you expect. I mean, a lot of the African countries are increasing. Oh, not North Africa. Wasn't Morocco like quite well developed? What happened here? What happened to Egypt? What happened to Egypt? Because, like, throughout much of history, Egypt has been one of the wealthier places in the world at times. And now it's really low. Like, it's right by India. Yeah, Egypt 12.8. Madagascar has a higher standard of living than Egypt. Like, Iran has been under massive sanctions. So that one makes sense. Indonesia too? And there's some that they don't even have data on, like North Korea, much of Central Africa, a lot of Africa just in general. Uruguay, Chile. Okay, I've completely gotten off topic. I was ending the stream. Have a good night.